The sleek research vessel, Harmonious Discovery, drifts into orbit around the blue-green world, its adaptive camouflage rendering it invisible against the starfield. Chief Sinologist Trazik, his translucent fingers trembling slightly, watches the main viewer as it displays scenes from the planet below. The 17 species of the Galactic Concord had encountered many civilizations before, but none like this. They call themselves humans, whispers cultural analyst Vreen, her voice catching, and they are unlike anything in our records. Trazik's inner eyelids flutter rapidly, a sign of deep distress among his kind. The atmospheric composition alone should make this world uninhabitable to advanced life. Oxygen levels so high that spontaneous combustion seemed inevitable. Yet these humans not only survived in this toxic soup, but deliberately created controlled flames for cooking, warmth, and entertainment. "Show me their physical capabilities again," Trazik orders, his voice steadier than he feels. The main screen shifts to a series of human athletic competitions. Marathon runners pushing their bodies far beyond what any conquered species would consider safe endurance limits. Swimmers plunging into freezing waters without protective coverings. Humans deliberately striking each other in ritualized combat sports. Medical Officer Zal approaches the console, her tendrils pulsing with agitation. Their pain threshold defies our understanding, she notes, analyzing the biometric data. "Look here, this human has continued functioning despite multiple fractures to their support structure." The command deck falls silent as they observe a human mountaineer continuing to climb despite frostbitten extremities. Several junior officers turn away from the screens. "They're young," continues Vreen, bringing up new imagery, engage in high-risk activities as part of normal development. They call it play, but our behavioral analysts classify many of these activities as potential survival training. Navigations Officer Pell, normally reserved even by Viridian standards, speaks up unexpectedly. "They sleep," he says, his voice filled with wonder and horror. "Every solar cycle, they enter a state resembling death, where consciousness is temporarily suspended." "A vulnerability?" asks Security Chief Morex hopefully. "No," responds Zell, quite the opposite. Their neural scans indicate this sleep somehow strengthens their cognitive functions. They emerge from this death-like state more capable than before. Trazik rises from his command chair, circling the central data display. The ship had been observing Earth for 14 standard cycles now, far longer than protocol allowed for initial assessment. "What troubles me most," he finally admits, is their psychological profile. They seek out danger. They deliberately expose themselves to environmental extremes that would kill most sentient species. A junior scientist tentatively raises a manipulator appendage. Perhaps they evolved on a less hostile world and only recently. "No," interrupts Vreen. "Their biological records are clear. They evolved here in these conditions. What we're seeing isn't adaptation. This is their natural state." The implications silence everyone on the command deck. A species that evolved considering this environment normal would find the controlled environments of Concord worlds trivially easy to conquer. Trazik makes his decision. "Prepare first contact protocols," he orders. "But modify our approach. Standard diplomatic procedures assume new species will be overawed by our technology and grateful for our protection." "And these humans?" asks Morex. Trazik stares at the screen where a human rescue team is rushing into a burning building, voluntarily entering flames that would mean instant death for his kind. "These humans," he says quietly, "might not need our protection at all. And that, my friends, is what terrifies me most. Specialist Lorne's primary sensory fronds twitch uncontrollably as he compiles his report. 23 standard cycles of observation have yielded findings so disturbing that the Harmonious Discovery's crew now works in rotating shifts. No one can bear to watch the humans continuously. Cultural analysis complete. Lorne announces to the gathered senior staff. Even Captain Trazik, normally stoic, shows signs of stress, his chromatophores flickering between warning colours. Lorne activates the holographic display. Humans are pursuit predators. He begins. An evolutionary path we previously believed incompatible with advanced intelligence. The display shows humans tracking animals across vast distances. Not with technology, but through a technique they call persistence hunting, following prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They don't just kill for sustenance. Lorne continues, his voice quavering. They display predatory behaviors in all aspects of their society. Their recreational activities, their social structures, even their mating rituals contain elements we would classify as hunting patterns. Medical Officer Zal reluctantly presents her findings next. Their biological functions defy categorization. They sleep, entering a vulnerable state where consciousness is temporarily suspended, yet they emerge stronger. They deliberately ingest toxic substances to build immunity. They expose themselves to harmful radiation to darken their outer membranes as a social display. The briefing room falls silent as footage shows humans deliberately entering icy waters, running through scorching deserts, and climbing sheer rock faces, all for what they classify as enjoyment. Most concerning, Zal continues, is their response to what should be lethal damage. The display shows medical procedures where humans survive with portions of vital organs removed, limbs severed and reattached, even partial brain tissue loss. They don't just endure catastrophic injury, they adapt to it. Security Chief Morax, a member of a naturally armoured species, shivers visibly. Their conflict behaviours are equally disturbing. When threatened, most species retreat or submit. Humans, he pauses, mandibles clicking nervously. Humans counterattack. They become more aggressive, more creative, and more determined when facing superior force. Captain Trazik absorbs this information silently before asking, and their technology trajectory. Science Officer Kelm responds, accelerating at rates that violate our predictive models. They advance fastest in response to crisis. War, disease, environmental collapse. Events that would cripple other civilizations somehow drive human innovation. Navigation Officer Pell interrupts with sudden urgency. Captain, sensors detect an imminent solar flare. Our position will be compromised in approximately 7 minutes. The standard protocol is clear. Retreat and observe from a greater distance. But Trazik makes a different calculation. Prepare first contact protocols, he orders, shocking the crew. Captain, questions Morax. Regulations state. Regulations were written for meeting species like us. Trazik interrupts. Not for them. He gestures to the display showing a human rescue team entering a collapsed structure, risking death to save others. Consider their predatory psychology. If we flee now and they detect our departure. Understanding dawns across alien faces. To a predator species, something running away triggers pursuit. Their historical records are filled with stories of hunting unknown creatures, adds Lorne quietly. They call them cryptids and pursue them relentlessly. If they glimpse us fleeing. Exactly, nods Trazik. Better to approach openly than risk becoming their next great hunt. Diplomatic team to the shuttle bay. We make contact in 1 hour. As the crew disperses, Trazic remains, watching humans on the display. They sleep like the dead, bleed red with oxidized iron, seek out danger for pleasure, and can chase prey to exhaustion. We found predators among the stars, he whispers to himself. May the void help us all. The Grand Hall of the United Nations falls silent as the Galactic Concord delegation glides through the central aisle. Ambassador K'leth leads the procession, his iridescent robes shimmering under Earth's harsh lighting. Behind him follow representatives of 7 conquered species, each selected for their psychological resilience and diplomatic experience. None feel prepared for this moment. Distinguished representatives of Earth, K'leth begins, his translator converting his melodic tones into human languages. We come in peace and friendship, seeking dialogue between our civilizations. The human response seems positive. Smiles, a baring of teeth that the Concord delegates have been briefed, is not a threat display, appear on many faces. The Secretary General approaches the podium, extends warm welcomes, and then does something none of the aliens are truly prepared for. He steps forward and extends his hand. K'leth freezes momentarily. The briefing materials covered this ritual: a handshake, a pressing of flesh against flesh, an exchange of microbiomes that would be considered an intimate biological connection on most conquered worlds. The watching delegates tense visibly. Medical Officer Zell, monitoring remotely from orbit, transmits urgent warnings about potential pathogen exposure, but diplomatic protocol cannot be broken now. With visible hesitation, K'leth extends his upper appendage. The Secretary General's warm fingers wrap around it with alarming strength. Biometric sensors embedded in K'leth's epidermis record data that will later horrify the Concord Medical Council. Human body temperature runs so hot it would indicate fatal fever in most species. Their grip strength exceeds safety parameters for diplomatic contact. Microprobes detect millions of microorganisms transferring from the human's skin. We look forward to learning from each other, says the Secretary General, unaware of the silent panic flooding through the alien delegation. The formal ceremony proceeds to the cultural exchange portion. Human military representatives demonstrate tactical maneuvers that leave Security Chief Morax trembling behind his ceremonial armor. Humans deliberately throw their bodies through space, accepting impacts that would shatter conquered exoskeletons. They demonstrate their projectile weapons, casually handling devices that accelerate metal to speeds that could penetrate most conquered vessels. And now a small reception, announces the Secretary General, leading the way to tables laden with what humans call food. Here comes the final horror. The diplomatic briefing had warned about human consumption practices, but witnessing it proves far more disturbing. Humans tear, slice, and grind parts of other organisms with specialized bone structures in their mouths. They consume flesh and vegetation simultaneously. They willingly ingest fermented substances that would render most sentients unconscious. Ambassador K'leth watches a human diplomat bite into something called a rare steak, pink fluid running down his chin, and finally reaches his limit. His primary air sac contracts involuntarily, and he sways on his motion appendages. "Are you all right, Ambassador?" asks a concerned human diplomat, reaching out with those strong, hot fingers. K'leth manages to steady himself. "Yes, your world is stimulating. The gravity is stronger than we are accustomed to." The half-truth satisfies the human, who nods sympathetically. "We understand. Please let us know if we can adjust anything for your comfort." This simple offer of accommodation, coming from beings who can survive environments that would kill most conquered species instantly, strikes K'leth as both touching and terrifying. As the reception continues, K'leth transmits an encrypted message to the asterisk Harmonious Discovery asterisk. There are predators who believe themselves to be peaceful. They offer friendship with hands that can crush our bones. Most concerning of all, they seem genuinely unaware of how dangerous they are. Admiral Zeno's tentacle slams against the polished surface of the conference table with a sound that echoes through the Concord Military Council chamber. The holographic display hovering above the table flickers momentarily from the impact. This cannot be accurate, he insists, compound eyes fixed on the data streams. No species could survive these conditions, let alone evolve intelligence within them. Chief Military Analyst Dorn stands firm despite the Admiral's outburst. The data is verified, sir. Multiple sources, all consistent. What you're seeing is humanity's military history, spanning approximately 3,000 of their years. The assembled council members, representing the defensive forces of 17 spacefaring civilizations, watch in stunned silence as the display cycles through human warfare. From primitive blade weapons dripping with red fluid to thermonuclear exchanges that scorched entire continents. From simple wooden vessels crossing vast oceans to stealth aircraft invisible to detection systems. From siege engines to orbital weapons platforms. Note the pattern, continues Dorn, her exoskeleton clicking nervously. Most species experience technological regression during prolonged conflicts. Resources become scarce, infrastructure fails, scientific progress stalls. She highlights a section of the timeline. Humans show the opposite pattern. Their most significant technological advancements correlate directly with their largest conflicts. This period they call their Second World War produced more technological innovation in 6 years than the previous century. Admiral Vril of the Aquatic Worlds leans forward, her breathing apparatus bubbling anxiously. And their tolerance for environmental extremes during combat operations. Dorn brings up new footage that causes several council members to avert their visual organs. Human soldiers functioning in environments the Concord classifies as immediately lethal. Arctic warfare in temperatures that would freeze Concord blood solid. Desert operations in heat that would dehydrate most species within minutes. Underwater missions without external breathing apparatus, and most disturbing, combat in irradiated zones where the background radiation alone would cause cellular collapse in Concord physiology. Their endurance extends beyond environmental factors. Dorn continues, her professional tone belied by trembling appendages. Their combat medics report that human soldiers continue fighting despite injuries our medical science classifies as fatal. Blood loss exceeding 40%, punctured respiratory organs, shattered skeletal structures. Where our species would enter emergency stasis, humans often continue functioning. The final footage shows human special forces conducting a halo jump, falling from near orbit with only thin fabric to slow their descent. They throw themselves from the sky, whispers Admiral Zeno, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. General Krax, the most decorated Concord military mind, speaks for the first time. What are your recommendations, Analyst Dorn? Dorn dims the horrific imagery and brings up her formal assessment. Humanity must be classified as a controlled integration species with strict protocols. Their potential as allies is unprecedented, as is their threat level should diplomatic relations deteriorate. You believe they could pose a genuine threat to the Concord? Asks Admiral Vril skeptically. Their technology remains centuries behind our defensive capabilities. Dorn's response chills the chamber. Their technology, yes, but their adaptability, their capacity to innovate under pressure, and their apparent inability to recognize when they are defeated. She pauses. Consider this. Every spacefaring species in the Concord evolved as prey or symbiotes. Humanity appears to be the first predator species to reach the stars. The implications settle over the Council like a shroud. The Concord had never needed to consider what might happen if creatures evolved to hunt, rather than hide discovered interstellar travel. One final observation, Dorn adds quietly. In every conflict we've analysed, humans fight most effectively when they believe themselves to be cornered. Unlike rational species who recognise when surrender is the optimal choice, humans become more dangerous when victory appears impossible. General Krax rises slowly. Then we must ensure they never feel cornered by us. The grand exhibition hall on Capital World Harmonium stands as the pinnacle of Concord architecture, an enormous biodome designed to accommodate all 17 member species in their preferred environmental conditions. Security Director Vex monitors the diplomatic gathering with heightened vigilance, his attention focused on the recently arrived human delegation. Small group approaching Sector 7, reports a subordinate, highlighting a cluster of biosignatures on the monitor. Vex zooms in, mandibles clicking with concern. Is that a juvenile human? Was this authorized? On screen, 6-year-old Sophia Chen skips happily alongside her parents, ambassadorial aides representing Earth's Pacific Alliance. The gathering marks the first time human civilians have been permitted on a Concord core world, a controversial decision that required multiple security exemptions. Track the juvenile, Vex orders. Human young are reportedly even less predictable than adults. Within 10 minutes, his concern proves justified. Sophia, momentarily unattended when her parents engage in conversation with Deltanian diplomats, wanders through an archway into the Xenobotanical Gardens. Security sensors register her progress past specimens that would cause anaphylactic shock in most species. Move Intercept Team to Section 12, Vex commands, watching in horror as Sophia reaches toward a shimmering Altarian crystal bloom, a plant that secretes paralytic compounds when touched. Before security can reach her, Sophia's small fingers brush the luminescent petals. The plant recoils, but Sophia simply giggles and moves on, completely unaffected by toxins that could immobilize a Concord adult for days. Impossible, whispers the botanical curator, who has joined Vex at the monitoring station. Our analysis indicated the compounds would be cross-reactive with human physiology. The situation escalates when Sophia, continuing her exploration, trips and falls hard against a decorative stone edge. Security cameras capture the moment in excruciating detail. Her skin breaks open, and bright red human blood, containing oxygen-bearing iron compounds toxic to many species, contacts the air. Nearby Delphidian delegates scatter in panic, their neural nets registering the iron content as an imminent environmental hazard. Alarms activate automatically, detecting the presence of a Class 3 biohazard. Vex dispatches emergency response teams, but the genuine crisis occurs moments later when Sophia, seemingly unconcerned by her bleeding knee, enters a gravity-controlled pavilion designed for methane-breathing delegations. Full emergency protocols. Vex shouts as warning indicators flash across his console. The pavilion contains an atmosphere that should cause immediate respiratory failure in oxygen breathers. The gravity, calibrated for species evolved on low-mass worlds, is set at 0.3 standard. Yet the monitoring systems show Sophia's biosignature continuing to move through the pavilion, not just surviving, but adapting. Her small lungs filter the foreign atmosphere with only minor distress. Her body adjusts to the altered gravity with the natural resilience of a child who has played on trampolines. Professor Quill, the Concord's leading xenobiologist who happened to be attending the exhibition, watches the readings with scientific awe that overrides his instinctive fear. The child's body is making real-time adjustments to environmental changes that would require generations of evolutionary adaptation in our species, he notes, recording the data. Look at these metabolic markers. Her cellular structure is temporarily reorganizing to process the methane compounds. When Sophia's terrified parents finally reach the pavilion entrance, they do the unthinkable. They enter the hazardous environment without special equipment to retrieve their daughter. Security footage captures the moment. 2 adult humans voluntarily entering lethal conditions, their bodies visibly struggling but functional, driven by the imperative to protect their offspring. That evening, as medical teams confirm the humans have suffered no permanent damage, emergency sessions of the Scientific Council convene with a single agenda item. Human adaptive capability represents a biological paradigm that contradicts fundamental Concord understanding of evolution itself. The Galactic Concord Grand Scientific Assembly falls into stunned silence as Dr. Mazil completes loading her presentation data. The renowned evolutionary theorist stands before the packed auditorium, her slender form barely visible behind the podium designed for larger species. Behind her, comparative planetary charts illuminate the massive display wall. Distinguished colleagues, she begins, her translator conveying the gravity in her harmonic tones. I present today findings that will fundamentally alter our understanding of evolutionary processes across known space. The audience, representing the scientific elite of 17 worlds, shifts uncomfortably. The small contingent of human scientists seated in a special observation section exchange puzzled glances, uncertain why their presence was specifically requested. Humans, continues Dr. Mazil, activating the first comparison chart, did not evolve as we did. The display shows Earth alongside other conquered homeworlds, with environmental data streaming alongside. They developed on what we must now classify as a death world, a planet with environmental pressures so severe that, according to all previously established models, they should have prevented advanced intelligence from emerging. Murmurs ripple through the audience as the evidence unfolds on screen. Earth's high gravity minus 1.3 times the Concord average. Its extreme temperature variations, spanning ranges that would require specialized equipment for most conquered species. The solar radiation levels that would cause cellular damage to unprotected Concord biology within minutes. The atmospheric composition rich in corrosive oxygen. The abundance of large predators throughout evolutionary history. The pathogen diversity that should have caused cyclical population collapses. The statistical improbability of intelligent life evolving under these conditions, Dr. Mazil continues, exceeds our previous probability models by 7 orders of magnitude. She activates a simulation showing the developmental timeline of Earth alongside the averaged timeline of other Concord worlds. Note the frequency of extinction-level events, she points out. Where our worlds experience gradual, relatively stable progression, Earth's evolutionary path resembles a series of violent resets. Massive climate shifts, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, each capable of sterilizing a standard world. Yet after each catastrophe, life on Earth not only recovered but diversified. The human scientists shift uncomfortably as they become the focus of attention. The realization slowly dawns that to the assembled Concord scientists, they represent fascinating specimens rather than colleagues. Dr. Mazil reaches the most controversial portion of her presentation. Most significant is our discovery regarding human genetic repair mechanisms, she explains, displaying molecular models. Humans possess cellular adaptation capabilities that allow them to incorporate environmental stressors into their biological systems within a single lifetime. She highlights specific gene sequences. Where our species would require thousands of generations to adapt to changed conditions, humans show epigenetic responses within days. Their immune systems don't just resist pathogens, they catalogue them. Their muscles don't just heal, they strengthen in response to damage. Their neural pathways don't just recover, they establish new connections. The presentation reaches its climax as Dr. Mazel displays her unified theory. The evidence supports only one conclusion. Humans represent an evolutionary path none of us anticipated, intelligence emerging not despite hostile conditions, but because of them. The constant environmental pressure created a species that expects adversity as the natural state of existence. She looks directly at the human delegation for the first time. They don't just survive harmful environments, she concludes, her voice both awed and troubled. They integrate environmental challenges into their biology and emerge stronger. In essence, what would kill us makes them thrive. As debates erupt throughout the scientific assembly, human representatives sit in uncomfortable silence, suddenly aware they are being discussed as something other than people, as evolutionary anomalies whose very existence challenges the fundamental understanding of life in the galaxy. Perhaps most concerning, Dr. Mazel adds quietly as the commotion builds, is what this suggests about human potential beyond Earth. If these are beings shaped by adversity, what becomes of them in environments designed for comfort and safety? Do they grow stronger still, or do they require the very challenges that would destroy us in order to reach their full potential? The emergency beacon from precursor world KX-419 pulses through Concord communication channels for 3 full days before the High Council acknowledges it publicly. The mining colony established there, the first human commercial venture permitted on a precursor site, has encountered something in the ancient ruins. High Councillor Wren stares at the distress footage with mounting horror. The human miners, operating in environmental conditions classified as immediately lethal without extensive life support, broadcast scenes of ancient defense systems reactivating. Mechanical constructs rise from millennium-long dormancy, targeting organic life forms with devastating energy weapons. How are they still transmitting? Asks Defense Minister Calm, mandibles clicking anxiously. Our environmental models predicted total atmospheric toxicity after the defense grid activation. Captain Trazik, now serving as the Council's human specialist, gestures toward the feed. Observe their emergency protocols. They've converted standard mining equipment into makeshift shelters and repurposed filtration systems to counter the toxins. The broadcast shows humans moving through acrid smoke, their environmental suits compromised yet still functioning. One miner, half her face exposed to the caustic atmosphere, continues coordinating evacuation efforts despite visible chemical burns forming on her skin. After 3 failed rescue attempts resulting in Concord casualties, the Council faces an unprecedented decision. The ancient defense systems pose a threat beyond KX-419, explains strategic analyst Orcs, highlighting projected weapon ranges. If fully activated, they could target nearby Concord worlds. We cannot allow this, yet we cannot safely approach the control center. A heavy silence falls over the council chamber. There may be one option, suggests Trazik reluctantly. The humans have requested permission to mount their own rescue operation. The proposal meets immediate resistance. Allowing humans unrestricted access to precursor technology violates multiple security protocols. Yet, as projected casualties mount, Commander Elena Vasquez and her team of human specialists receive unprecedented authorization to intervene. Concord observers watch from orbit as the human dropship descends toward the mining colony. Predictive models give the mission a survival probability of less than 7%. They know these odds, asks High Counselor Vren. They calculated them independently, confirms Trazik, and still volunteered. The mission parameters defy Concord operational logic. The humans plan to land directly in the hot zone, proceed on foot through toxic terrain, and manually override the ancient control systems. Worst of all, they intend to do this with minimal protective equipment to maintain mobility. The dropship's crash landing demolishes the last shreds of Concord confidence in the mission. Impact sensors register forces that should render the occupants unconscious, if not dead. Yet helmet cameras activate moments later, showing the team not only alive but implementing contingency protocols. Vasquez, comes the transmission, the commander's voice raspy from chemical exposure. Landing successful. Proceeding to objective. The observation deck falls silent as the humans advance through conditions their instruments classify as incompatible with biological function. The team moves through ruins where atmospheric composition fluctuates between toxic and corrosive. Radiation levels spike unpredictably. Gravity fields distort around active precursor technology. The mission reaches its most astonishing moment when Vasquez and her second, Lieutenant Santos, reach the Defense Control Center, only to find the entrance blocked by an energy field that destroys their remaining equipment on contact. Without hesitation, they shed their compromised environmental suits entirely. What are they doing? Gasped an analyst. Their skin will. They're reducing electrical conductivity. Trazik interrupts. Understanding dawning. The field targets powered systems. Exposed to raw environmental conditions that Concord biology could not survive for seconds, Vasquez and Santos advance through the field. Their skin blisters from radiation. Blood seeps from their eyes and noses. Yet they continue, reaching the ancient console. As Vasquez manually overrides the systems, her vital signs fluctuating wildly on Concord monitors, the watching officials finally understand what Dr. Mazel's research had tried to convey. Humans don't succeed despite adversity. They are creatures literally forged by it. When the surviving team members return for medical treatment, refusing stasis transport and walking from their shuttle despite injuries that would have killed most conquered species, the military council convenes an emergency session. Its conclusion is unanimous. Human crisis response capabilities must become the foundation of a restructured Concord defense doctrine. 10 years after first contact, the Galactic Concord bears little resemblance to the civilization that once watched Earth with trepidation. The Grand Assembly Hall on New Harmonium, a station specifically designed with human-compatible sections, hosts representatives from all member species for the decennial celebration. Elder Council representative Tilana, her once vibrant scales now faded with age, addresses the assembled delegates. Behind her, historical footage plays showing the Concord's initial horrified reactions to human capabilities. Ambassador Khalef flinching from a handshake, medical teams recoiling from human blood samples, security officers watching in disbelief as humans casually entered hostile environments. We feared humanity when we discovered them. Tulana acknowledges, her translator conveying gentle amusement in her tones. We classified them as creatures of a death world, not understanding that the galaxy needed what such a world produces. The display shifts to more recent footage, human specialists working alongside conquered engineers to colonize worlds previously deemed uninhabitable. Human immune system research, revolutionizing medical treatments across 17 biologies. Human crisis protocols being adopted by emergency services throughout conquered space. What no one anticipated a decade earlier was how perfectly human capabilities would complement conquered civilization. Where conquered species excelled at stability, cooperation, and long-term planning, humans provided adaptability, crisis management, and innovative problem-solving. The integration had not been without conflicts. Human aggression and risk-taking behaviors still alarmed many traditional Concord members, but the benefits have proven undeniable. The assembly hall lighting dims dramatically as emergency signals flash across communication channels. The celebratory atmosphere evaporates instantly. Swarm activity detected in the core sectors, announces Admiral Chen, the first human elevated to Concord High Command. The tactical display shows a horrifying sight. A hive mind species, previously encountered only in fragmented ancient warnings, now consuming all in its path at the galaxy's edge. Initial defense projections scroll across screens, showing catastrophic losses based on conventional Concord strategies. The swarm's advance seems unstoppable using traditional tactics, until Admiral Chen activates the Human Adaptive Response protocols. The assembly watches in amazement as the tactical display recalculates. Human-led forces deploy using strategies no Conquered strategist would conceive, deliberately exposing ships to gravitational shear to achieve impossible maneuvers, using solar radiation as weapon amplifiers, sending boarding teams through vacuum with minimal protection to disable swarm control nodes. Where the Concord would have established defensive lines and fought methodical retreats, human commanders launch high-risk offensives targeting swarm communication hubs. Where Concord doctrine called for preserving forces at all costs, humans concentrate overwhelming firepower at critical junctures, accepting casualties to achieve strategic objectives. Within days, the swarm's advance halts. Within weeks, it fragments into isolated pockets. The victory celebration coincides with an announcement from the Joint Human Concord Medical Research Division. The swarm's biological weapons, designed to target specific genetic markers, had begun affecting 3 conquered species. Standard medical protocols have failed completely. Yet human genetics science, developed from their unique evolutionary path, had found the solution. The very adaptability that allowed humans to survive on their death world now provided the key to saving species that once feared them as predators. As human and alien representatives stand together on the platform, Ambassador Trazik, now ancient by his species' standards, and one of the few remaining who remembered first contact, leans toward his human counterpart. "I once called your kind predators among the stars," he confesses quietly. "I meant it as a warning. I never imagined it would become our salvation." The human ambassador smiles in response. "Perhaps that's what predators are for in the greater ecosystem," she suggests. "Not just to hunt, but to keep the balance, to prevent any single adaptation from dominating unchallenged." Trazik considers this profound insight, then offers the words that will become the new Concord motto, now inscribed in 17 languages throughout settled space. Sometimes survival requires teeth. The human ambassador's smile widens at this, revealing the very anatomical feature that had once terrified their new allies, now recognized throughout the galaxy, not as a threat display, but as the symbol of humanity's unique gift, the capacity to face the universe's dangers with both determination and joy.